What does it actually mean to be in 3D, 4D, or 5D consciousness? Today we're going to explore these states of awareness based on a few well-known frameworks that are all pointing to similar ideas. The 3D, 4D, and 5D are simply states of awareness. Neither better or worse than the others, just different things that we can experience. They're also considered to be dimensions or overlapping planes of existence, different timelines that we can choose either consciously or unconsciously, depending on how well we've recognized our subconscious programming. Let's go through each. So the third dimension is characterized by ego consciousness. Life feels like it's outside of our control. We may sense a state of disempowerment, lack, scarcity, need. This is very much in duality or separation consciousness, meaning we feel very separate from everyone else. This is where we see polarization, division, us versus them narratives. Michael Beckwith has a really cool framework, and if I were to place it in this map, I would say, to me, is very much a 3D state of consciousness, where life feels like we have no control and it's happening to us. Eckhart Tolle, in his book, The New Earth, talks about ego consciousness in depth and our relationship to time in this space. The past feels fixed and the future feels uncertain. We're a lot less in the present moment. And when it comes to the physicality of the third dimension, it is characterized by the law of space-time. So for something to exist, it has to have a past, present, future, height, width, depth. So this is something that's very grounded in the physical realm. We'll also see that it's very governed by the laws of man, rather than the laws of the universe. And so if we take Michael Beckwith's framework, we have to me, that's the furthest away from the fourth dimension. By me is much closer. It's a much more empowered state. Here, we take action and responsibility in our lives. We start to get out of victimhood. We realize that we have agency and that we can actually make change in our lives. However, if this remains unchecked, we can go full throttle into this and wind up in hustle culture, doing, striving, achieving, competition, coming from a place of fear, lack. This is generally referred to as wounded masculine energy. This has nothing to do with gender. It's just a fundamental force of existence with feminine energy. And so wounded masculine energy just means that we're full throttle in that energy while ignoring the feminine. That can easily lead to burnout and put us back into to me. What's actually happening here is we have deeper programming that we haven't become aware of. Something in our subconscious mind driving our actions. Esther Hicks has a really interesting analogy, and my interpretation of her rowing upstream analogy is very much a by me state, rowing hard to try to make life happen. In his book, The Bitcoin Standard, Seyfadin Ammous refers to the relationship with time as high time preference. Here we have a pull towards the now, faster, quicker, cheaper. There's this background noise of scarcity, and it's very much tied to time, money, and worth. Now, this isn't a judgment at all. We were all born into a system that very much has this by me energy. And I talk about this broader system in depth on this channel. It is made to reinforce this state by design. But when we become aware of this state, we can work through it. The way that we move through these different states of awareness is just by becoming aware of our subconscious programming. But one way to move from 3D to 4D is what Esther Hicks describes as letting go of the oars, letting the river float you downstream. Yes, there'll be rapids along the way, but you just steer your boat. You're not forcing upstream anymore. The 4D is an overlapping dimension in between the 3D and the 5D, and conscious agency is incredibly important here. Becoming aware of our programming and making decisions. Do I want to react from a 3D state of consciousness, or do I want to react from a 4D or higher state of consciousness to what I'm experiencing? Because essentially, we make up our experience of life. Whatever we experience is true for us. The fourth dimension can come about very differently in our lives depending on our experience. It can be a totally natural transition or something that actually shakes us awake. So, for example, we might have a crisis or lose a job, lose a relationship, lose someone that we love, and then start questioning everything in our lives. This can lead to a much deeper awakening. It's an even more empowered state where we have more agency. We realize, hey, I have all this childhood programming that's affecting me as an adult, things that I was taught as a kid that's still playing in the background of my mind and leading to things I consider to be more detrimental in my life as an adult. Because we can have great childhood programming as well, but sometimes there's things that we would rather let go of if we knew that they were there in the back of our mind. And so becoming aware of it and working through it through shadow work, therapy, inner child healing, lots of different modalities, we become empowered and more aware and take aligned action. And in this state of consciousness, we start to feel like everything in our lives is a lesson, teaching us something, maybe guiding our soul towards the timeline that it intended in this incarnation. We may start to experience synchronicities, inner alignments, greater freedom. This is a place where deep shifts actually happen. But there's a second state that I would place within 4D, which is much closer to the 5D rather than being closer to the 3D. And this state is through me. It's more a state of surrender, following our soul's directions through our passions, joys, synchronicities. Bashar talks very much about this. It's a sense of inner freedom, alignment, and empowerment. We trust that life is showing us the way through chance encounters. And we start to look at all that programming that says to us we can't, we must, we have to. And we decide, do I actually want to do these things? And the indicator is that inner joy, that inner excitement. Eckhart Tolle speaks about how the mind chatter quiets and we have more inner stillness, more anchoring in the present moment. We may also feel more aligned with our sense of purpose, bringing us more into a flow state where we feel connected to something greater around us, not just the physical realm like in the 3D. This is where some people's sixth sensibilities come online, meaning the intuition beyond the physical. This state of consciousness is incredibly powerful, but we might start to put pressure on ourselves to remain constantly in the 4D and not fall back into the 3D. And in reality, spiritual growth is never a linear path. It's always like one step forward, two step back, or two step forward, one step back, up and down. It's a process, and it might be different in different aspects of our lives. In general, we might be in the 4D, but when we have to go see family or when we have to work with certain colleagues, we might fall back into the 3D state of consciousness. And it's okay. There's lessons along the way for us. When it comes to teaching, I myself was very much in through me 4D state of consciousness at the beginning of last year. And without realizing it, I slipped into 3D consciousness by the end of the year. It's only while having a conversation with someone I consider a mentor on this channel that I had fallen back into a to-me experience for this specific topic. Sometimes it can be really hard to see it within ourselves, even when we're aware of these states of consciousness. The important thing is noticing it and deciding how we want to move forward. But there is one thing that can kind of trap us in the 4D. Something that's never discussed in personal development and spirituality, and it is our systemic programming, the system into which we were born. Generally in personal development and spirituality, we talk about our childhood programming, how it affects our mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic bodies, with tons of amazing modalities to help work through that. But there's no discussion of how the system into which we were born also taught us a bunch of collective subconscious programming that is running our lives. If you're wondering if you also hit a ceiling or where you are when it comes to the individual and systemic matrices, I built a free assessment that maps both layers. You don't need to enter your email, it's completely private and runs in your browser. I sincerely hope it's helpful for you to see where you are on the journey. And then the fifth dimension, 5D consciousness, is where life happens as me. Now, I'm not going to pretend I know the 5D state of consciousness very well. Honestly, I've only had glimpses of it in my life, so I'm going to talk about what I know about it and what I've experienced, what it feels like, and what I've learned about this state of consciousness. This shift from 4D to 5D consciousness is a different relationship with humanity and our universal experiences. It's much more a state of connection, unity consciousness, as Eckhart Tolle discusses in his book, The New Earth. There's a sense of being connected to everything, unconditional love, peace, detachment from outcomes. Our experience of time is very different. We might be more connected to this cyclical and natural experience of time rather than just linear. And Saifedean Ammous talks about a different experience of time in his book, not specifically within this framework, but I thought it was interesting to add it in here. Low time preference. Our experience of time is no longer rushed as it is in the 3D. Here, there's a much greater emphasis on trust, quality, allowing, receiving, being. Time is no longer something that we need to chase. There isn't a sense of scarcity. There is a sense of unity, compassion, and abundance as a default. There's a sense of detachment from outcomes without disengagement from life. To quote the Bible, it is being in this world, but not of it. While I know that many people do experience this state of consciousness, it's somewhat more rare in our world today just because we were born into a system that is imposing 3D consciousness. While for some this is actually their natural state of consciousness, for others it might just be something that we touch upon throughout our lives. Because striving to be in 5D is actually by me, which is a 3D state of consciousness. I always had an image in my mind, not exactly this one, but something similar, when I was working through the 3D, 4D, and 5D and bringing together all these different frameworks. And so, for example, to me is kind of like trying to stay afloat. By me is rowing upstream. For me is letting go of the oars. Through me is more like watching from the sidelines. And as me is a much higher perspective. So these frameworks are not about ranking yourself. None are better or worse. They're just different experiences of reality. And here are some signposts along it. Signs we're in the 3D is reactivity, scarcity, urgency, and high time preference. Signs we're in the 4D is catching yourself, doing the inner work, and making conscious choices, exercising agency and free will. Signs we're in the 5D is ease, patience, low time preference, presence. And like I said earlier, spiritual growth is not a linear path. Most of us move between these states, even within the same day, even within the same hour. The question is, which level am I operating from right now? And I have a free assessment, like I said, at Daniella.io/assessments. I'd highly recommend checking it out. I think it'd be really helpful to see where we are in our own lives on this path. And so if you use the assessment, you'll get your answer right away. You won't have to wait for your results or enter an email. If this framework resonates, my book Beyond Money goes even deeper. It was written exactly for the person who has done real inner work and is wondering what comes next. Thanks for being here.